Alright, in this video we'll be looking at adding fractions. Subtraction's pretty much the same thing, you just minus instead of plus when you get there. So the first example is if you have 2/7 plus 3/7. The way to picture this, remember, was you have one whole block and things being over 7 means we're cutting the block into 7 bits. 2/7 would mean we take 2 of these bits. 3/7 would mean we take 3 of these bits. And all up, you have 5 of these bits, so it's 5 out of 7. Now notice that you did not add the bottom numbers because, well, it doesn't make sense to, right? The bottom number is only telling you how many bits you cut it into at first. It tells you how small each piece is. Only the top number is counting how many you have. And so I hope it makes sense that you only need to add those top numbers and the bottom ones stay the same because you're not changing how big or how small each of those pieces is. But what if those bottom numbers are different then? Let's say it's a half and a third. What then? Well, a half you would think of as something like this. A third is where you cut it into 3 bits instead and take one of those bits and you're trying to put them together. And so I think if you look at the picture, you see it's not an easy thing to be able to tell straight away how much you've got there because those 2 pieces are different size. And so we expect that we're going to do something a bit different with that. Right? And what we're going to do is use the work we did with fractions before to try and make those bottom numbers turn into the same thing. Now we have control over fractions because we can multiply top and bottom by the same number without changing what the value of the fraction is. So what we're going to do is try and think, what can 2 and 3 both multiply into? Well, I think if you multiply 2 by 3 and 3 by 2, they both become 6. Right? And so you can use this to turn those bottom numbers into the same thing. So what happens with a green fraction? Well, if we multiply that bottom number 2 by 3, we've got to do the same thing to the top. You've got to multiply that top number by 3 as well, and so you get 3 out of 6. And again, that means the same as 1/2. And on the right, the same thing happens if I multiply that bottom 3 by 2. The top number has to also multiply by 2, and 1 times 2 is just 2. Right? Now, that might look a bit weird, but all we've done, if you look at the picture now, all we've done by changing those fractions, we're not really changing, but just writing them in that different way, is we're doing this. That's all we're doing. Okay? We're seeing the green fraction as 3 out of 6 and the blue fraction as 2 out of 6, giving us a way now to fairly count how many pieces we've got, because now we have 5 out of 6. Okay, and so if you look back at the numbers, you see that the second line, 3 out of 6 plus 2 out of 6, is the same as the kind of thing we had in the first example, where the bottom numbers are the same, so you can just add those top numbers together. Okay, so a summary, if the bottom numbers are the same, you just add or subtract the top. So we saw 2/7 plus 3/7. The answer is still out of 7 because you haven't changed how big or how small each piece is, but you're counting 2 of them plus 3 of them give you 5 of them. If the bottom numbers are different, then we can change the fractions. Now, not actually changing, but we're rewriting them to make them the same. Make those bottom numbers the same so that we can then add or subtract the top. So let's see a different example of that to finish off. We have 2/5 plus 3/8. And you think, what can 5 and 8 both multiply into? What can they both become? Right? Well, one easy way is you multiply them together. Now, sometimes there's an easier one, but something that always works is you multiply 5 by 8 and 8 by 5. That will always work, right? But if you can, find an easier one. In this case, we can't. So 5 and 8 can both become 40. How does 5 become 40? It multiplies by 8. And so if you multiply the 5 by 8, you better multiply that top 2 by 8 as well. That gives you 16. Then how does the fraction on the right, the 8 there, become 40? Well, the 8 has to multiply by 5. And if you do that, you better multiply the top by 5 as well. So 3 5s give you the 15 on top there. And so they're both now out of 40, which means your answer can be out of 40 as well. That doesn't need to change. But 16 out of 40 plus 15 out of 40 gives you 31 out of 40. Okay, subtraction's the same, just in that last step you'd minus instead of plus. Okay, so that's all for adding and subtracting fractions. Thanks for watching. See you next time.